you were to take a bum and a billionaire, put them in a room, hand them each a gun, the probability of like who's going to walk away on top becomes a coin toss. Okay, now
No, not to get too off topic, but I would pay to watch that. I would I would pay-per-view the fuck out of just like put Bill Gates in a room with a crack addict and give them each a Glock 19.
yeah, exactly. But I honestly believe that gun control is about actual people control, and the people that are most interested in funding this kind of stuff are people that want absolute control. And listen, think about this: if the country starts going to like a digital currency, if they were to do away with cash and everything's digital, right?
Yeah.
And they want to ban gas stoves, and they want everybody driving an electric car, and they want blah blah blah.
Yeah. We're seeing how well that's working this winter.
Right? Yeah. Well, exactly. But what I'm saying, there's a clear push to be able to control like someone's movement, their ability to transact. I mean,
Yeah.
their ability to do anything. I mean, we're heading towards a social credit score. I mean, that's obvious, okay?
You're listening to the Art and More podcast with your hosts, Nathan and BR. Nathan is a Canadian illustrator with a couple years of military experience, and BR is a British anarchist that moved to the States. Both are passionate shooters and community builders. Together, they run the Seaburn Art page. Enjoy the show.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Art and War podcast. My co-host, our producer BR, is lame and went to bed at a reasonable human time. We're here for round 2 with Mike Mihalski. Mihalski, I want to say.
No, that's perfect. That's good.
Oh, thank you.
Malski, yeah.
From Sons of Liberty Gunworks, here for the second time in God, what was it? About a year?
About a year ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel that long, but yeah, it's been about a year.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute, and we were just talking about, and this is something that I complain about so much. I didn't hit record, and we basically had a half-hour conversation about the state of the gun industry and all sorts of good listening that none of you will ever hear. It's just gone. It's gone forever. But yeah, for the people who may not have heard the first episode, tell us a little bit about Sons of Liberty and what you do.
So we're a rifle manufacturer based out of San Antonio, Texas. Probably the fastest growing rifle company in our space, in terms of just our growth year over year and the amount of market share that we're taking. It's been pretty cool to see the rise. We unapologetically focus on defensive, like fighting guns. We build rifles for endurance, for that are meant for defense, that that have to absolutely work all the time, and that's kind of our main focus. We build AR-15s and 5.56, 6mm arc, 300 blackout, 6 max, of course, large frame stuff, your Creedmoors, your 308. So we focus on the gas guns for defensive use.
I kind of like that. You see a lot of, the M&P 15 Sporter, this is your sporting rifle. And something that I really like about you guys, not to mince words, is you don't give a fuck. And I kind of love that. You immediately say exactly what you're about.
Yeah.
That's part of your brand I friggin' love. And hell, it's the shirt you're wearing right now, Sons of Liberty 1776. I'm into it.
Yeah, I mean, the industry to me is the industry, in my opinion, is disappointingly silent on certain issues, and then when they do speak up, it's even more disappointing. Like you said, like the whole modern sporting rifle. There's been like this push to try to like church it up a little bit, and what's interesting, that is not at all reflective of what the gun buying public, their perception of it. This has nothing to do with politics. This is a completely apolitical thing. But if I saw a female in a gun store looking at an M&P Shield or a Glock 43, my first thought is not that she's going moose hunting. If you see, and by the way, semi-automatic handguns are the most prolific, as far as the sheer numbers of what's being sold out there. When you see somebody buying a Glock 19 or a Glock 43, there's no sporting purpose behind it. They're buying that for self-defense, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of any other type. I mean, even people's position on guns. I mean, I know a lot of people that have been historically anti-gun that have gone out and bought guns over the last few years. Whenever you look at like just kind of the decay of society, and in reduced emergency services in certain areas, places like that, and they go out and they buy a gun that's not for any sporting purpose. It's absolutely for self-defense. They're buying that gun in the event that they have to shoot another human with it, for in a lawful way, but that's why they purchased that gun. And it's not for pheasants, you
Yeah.
know?
And that's kind of something that I've seen. Well, I live in America now, but coming from Canada, just the death knell of gun ownership in Canada. Well, it's still ostensibly you can own a gun, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Not an AR-15; those are bad. Not a quote assault weapon, unquote; those are bad. But the uh, the desperate try to reevaluate and redefine what a gun is for, in which the people who want to ban them don't care. They don't give a shit. They couldn't
Yeah.
they couldn't care less if it was a sporting rifle or for moose hunting alone. It's trying to run away from what the gun is for, I think, is why the gun lobby. I'm not super familiar here about how the argument is phrased, but I'm glad to see it going in the other direction. But I do believe that's why the gun lobby in Canada lost.
Yeah, well, yeah, because whenever you listen to, first of all, there's a few different factions that you have to understand if you want to understand what the plan is, right? So you have well-intentioned, poorly informed people, right? Those are like
Yes.
the soccer moms, perhaps, or just kind of your middle of the road people that maybe casually own a gun, or maybe their only purpose for ever owning a gun is for hunting.
Yeah. Their
You know,
husband has a 357 in a sock drawer.
right, exactly right. So you have well-intentioned, poorly informed people, and to them, the idea of an assault rifle or a 30-round mag, like those things, they don't see the sporting or practical purpose of that, and so they associate it with something bad, right? So there's kind of like the apathetic side, which is unfortunately a gigantic segment of the voting public, right? And I mean, I advise lawmakers. I mean, if you ever read some certain tweets or certain posts, or if you ever hear certain um, lawmakers or kind of talking heads, some of that stuff I may have written, like to help,
Yeah.
kind of like get the point across to make sure. But they'll tell you right away that like 30-round mags do not pull well with soccer moms. And so anyways, but so you have like the kind of like the middle, kind of almost apathetic uh side. But then you have your real activists, which are your true believers, and they try to pose these arguments to sound reasonable, but if you understand their actual plan, an over and under shotgun, they would be fine banning that. There is no gun that is acceptable. And all you have to do is look at the UK, or you have to
Yeah.
look at some of these countries to where at one point gun ownership was actually, legal and fairly common, and now they have knife bans. Like a steak knife has to be registered. So you don't have to guess what the plan is. You just have to look to see, where they've let it happen.
I agree. I mean, look at Australia right now. I believe they're trying to ban pump action rifles, and
Yeah.
in Canada now they're trying to ban pinned magazines, like the
Wow.
530s. It's kind of ridiculous. I remember when every time the government there had a scandal, gun control would just come back on the menu, kind of regardless what was happening. And I remember someone linking a news article with a video of one of the people who was speaking on behalf of gun control, talking about how we need to go after bolt actions next. And no one actually eats deer. It's not very good. So it's not really hard to see. No, it was just like the most fucking like Coke bottle glasses, like, hyper liberal douchebag. Like probably hasn't actually been in nature in his entire life. But
Well,
these are the people
when
who
I
make policy. Yeah.
no, absolutely. These are the people that make policy. They're the people that vote. So when I have these conversations with folks that are moderates, or kind of uh, agnostic on the issue, they wonder why there's no compromise. Like for me, as a gun rights activist, when I'm not building and running a gun company, on my spare time when I'm a gun rights activist, I'm advocating for belt fed machine guns in vending machines, right?
Basically.
Because,
Amazon.
so that's my position on it. When people ask me why I come across as an extremist, it's because if there is no the moment that you give in on anything, the moment you give 1 inch, it's over and you'll never get it back. Every place where they've tried these draconian gun laws and the crime rate has not gone down and
Yeah.
the violence has gone up, and assaults and robberies and murders and things are, they don't look at their position and say, well, man, that didn't work, we should undo that and try something new. That's never how it goes. They just stack something else on top of it.
Yeah.
And so that's why, I mean, you cannot, cede anything. I would rather us be fighting to take ground. I
Yes.
want to see the Hughes Amendment repeal. I want to see the NFA repeal. We should be fighting for that, because just like how the left, or, and I don't mean to get political, but how the left, like if you notice, like the conversation over time always shifts.
Yeah.
It's constantly shifting. If you push for something so extreme, the other side ends up settling somewhere in the middle, except the middle is pretty far from where you originally were. And
Yeah.
so I would like to return the favor. you know?
I think that would be excellent. And seeing some of and maybe this is me being optimistic. And unfortunately, we were talking about not using social media very much right before we started recording. I do use it, unfortunately, for news. And I do see a lot of headway being made in the courtrooms of America, which kind of surprises me. But we had a couple of people on before, and I don't want to name names as I might misappropriate or misinterpret the quotes to the wrong individual. But the possibility of things like the NFA, which we may not ever get any luck having that repealed in Congress, may actually be thrown out in a courtroom one day. And
Yeah.
I'll absolutely admit I might just be coping here. I might absolutely be too optimistic for my own good.
I mean, if you look at cases like Bruin, I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, people looked at that. I know a lot of people looked at that as a case having to do with carrying, like where you can carry a gun. That case was much bigger than that. That case defines arms in the historical sense.
Yeah.
And if you look at how, arms were defined in the historical sense, Bruin opens the door for quite a bit of things. Now it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see if Bruin is used to successfully challenge some of these prosecutions. I'll tell you a really scary case that was that should concern all of us, especially in this space. There was a YouTuber, I believe, that got sentenced to prison for sponsoring those cards that had like
Oh, the auto
the
key cards.
the
Yeah,
auto key cards.
we've talked about this on this show before. It was, to anyone listening, it's genuinely just a small, I believe, a piece of printed sheet steel with a
Yeah,
drawing, effectively, of what could be bent into an auto sear.
for could be
So
been through a
effectively,
lightning
it's
link.
yeah,
And as far as I know, from what I've looked at into the case, the thing didn't even actually work. I don't think the YouTuber actually sold it.
no,
Um, I mean, this was a giant stretch to get a prosecution, and I think everybody that followed the case was fully expecting, an acquittal. And so
yeah,
when they convicted and sentenced this guy, that's pretty serious. That's the stuff where I'd like to see, hopefully maybe, Bruin applied, or it'd be interesting to see what that appeal is going to look like. That was a crazy case. If anyone's not familiar with it, I highly suggest going and looking it up. I mean, that one is stands out as truly baffling.
yeah. It's horrifying, and I really hope it is appealed. Um, that being said, I think my favorite, and this is kind of unrelated, but it's really fucking funny to me. Seeing and I think my most recent example is California trying to fight back on Bruin pushbacks by in the wording of Bruin, bans on arms have to be based on historical bans that were made around the time of the writing of the Constitution. So there weren't very many of those. So when California is fighting back against a ban, say you can't carry in a playground, you can't carry in a school, whatever insert whatever area, they are citing historical laws, usually banning black people from carrying guns.
And Native Americans, yeah.
Yeah,
So in the historical context of where guns were banned, who could carry them, who could own them, yeah, it was. I mean, it was minorities, it was African Americans, and it was Native Americans. And if they're going to, if they're going to use that historical context to get their point across, I would say the jig is up. I mean, look, it's we just celebrated Martin Luther King Day here in the States. I mean, every Martin Luther King Day, I usually make a post reminding people that he was denied a permit to carry. That Martin Luther King applied for a carry permit and was denied. And I was on a guest speaker at a school one time, and it was a debate. There was some moms demand action people on
Oh,
the
I
line.
remember this. Yeah,
Yeah, I was on there, right? And the moderator of the debate was really brilliant guy. As an attorney, happened to be a black dude, and I brought this point up, and he asked, "Well, why was he denied?" And I had to answer, "Because he was black." I mean, I mean, and that I mean, all gun control has always been about oppression, and has always been about making the populace toothless. I believe, I believe that gun control has never been less politically popular than it is now. If you were to like put it to a vote, okay? But the reason why the gun control lobby is so powerful is because it's funded by the wealthiest people in the world. The people that fund gun control, okay, like your Michael Bloombergs and even Bill Gates, and there's several there's several insanely wealthy people who
yeah,
fund the gun control the gun control side. I believe the answer is because if you were to lock a billionaire and a bum in a room and hand them each a pistol, like, to predict the likelihood of success becomes a lot less lopsided. Okay,
yeah,
if you were to take a bum and a billionaire, put them in a room, hand them each a gun, the probability of like who's going to walk away on top becomes a coin toss. Okay, now
no, not to get off too off topic, but I would pay to watch that. I
yeah,
would I would pay per view the fuck out of just like put Bill Gates in a room with a crack addict and give them each a Glock 19.
yeah, exactly. But I honestly believe that gun control is about actual people control, and the people that are most interested in funding this kind of stuff are people that want absolute control. And listen, think about this: if the country starts going to like a digital currency, if they were to do away with cash and everything's digital, right?
Yeah,
And they want to ban gas stoves, and they want everybody driving an electric car, and they want blah blah blah.
yeah. We're
Well,
seeing how well that's working this winter.
right, yeah, well, exactly. But what I'm saying, there's a clear push to be able to control like someone's movement, their ability to transact. I mean, their
Yeah,
ability to do anything. I mean, we're heading towards a social credit score. I mean, that's obvious. Okay.
yeah,
But if you have a gun, you're not completely helpless. Now, if you don't have a gun and you're at the complete mercy of the state to eat, to travel, to transact, to do whatever you're going to do, I mean, then you are. So, I mean, I believe that there is a legitimate I believe there is a legitimate like
agenda.
interest, yeah, a legitimate agenda, to disarm people because that is kind of like the last bastion of autonomy. The,
Yeah,
the 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 very last segment of like someone's true autonomy is the ability to at least go out fucking fighting.
yeah.
You know?
And exactly what you were saying about other countries that have taken that right away first, and exactly what's happening with them now. I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, Mike, but I'm thinking about all the ways that, for example, before I moved from Canada or my friends in European countries, the things that they're doing now that they have the guns are insane. Lucas, one of the co-hosts for the funnier episodes here, he lives in Ireland, and they're now passing law. If you're suspected of hate speech, which has no under their laws has no distinct definition, you get 12 months in prison for not handing your passwords over to the police. Things
Wow.
like that. And then you get to stuff as he told me how hard it was to get a driver's license there and how expensive and regulated it was to simply get a car. It's insane. It's and I do think guns are one very 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 fucking important part of a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
But seeing what they come for next, and I mean, even here, you don't even have to look across the borders. What they're coming for next here, but guns is usually the first to go before they regulate what you eat, what you drive, or what you don't drive.
Well, I mean,
Who
the
you
thing
can
the thing
see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, exactly. I mean, like, exactly what information that you have access to, like,
Yeah.
the kind of podcast you might want to listen to.
Yeah.
Like currently, right now, like one of the biggest threats globally, according to like the WEF, is
Oh, I saw
misinformation.
this.
Is
Yeah.
misinformation, right? And misinformation is anything that is counter to. I mean, what's hilarious if you haven't been living under a fucking rock for the last 3 years, almost all of the quote unquote misinformation has turned out to be absolutely fucking fact.
Yeah.
Has been absolutely true.
Yeah, and
Uh,
and now even like the mainstream media here is walking back all the things that were fact. Seeing shamefully, the people admitting on television, and these things never get the coverage that they should be. But all of the policies that we've been living under were based on just farce,
complete
just
complete
complete.
bullshit. Yeah, the
Yeah,
6 foot social distancing thing was based on absolutely nothing. This has been admitted, like in under oath in testimony that it was based in absolutely nothing. But I mean, think about how many small businesses closed down because they couldn't fit you know most majority of their employees in the same building, or
yeah,
restaurants that could have they had to space the tables out and they brought their usable square footage down to 25% or some bullshit. I mean,
yeah.
listen, let me ask you a question. Has anybody in your life personally come up to you and ever apologized for you know shaming you about not wearing a mask, or for questioning the social distancing thing? I mean, has anyone ever come up to you and apologized and said, "Man, I'm really sorry that like I blocked you on Facebook and I called you a dumbass." Like no one has ever once. I mean, I had a lot of I lost friends that I've known for like 20 years, like old high school buddies, stuff like that. I had a lot of people that were that kind of we stopped becoming friends because of my position on things like masking and social distancing and lockdowns and that. Like no one's ever come up to me and apologized. You
Yeah.
know, when
I
I
feel like a lot of people quietly walked it back afterwards. Some people doubled down. A lot of people doubled down, but people quietly walked it back afterwards. But no one has ever apologized to me either.
yeah, and when I bump into these people that like that we stop being friends after this, they kind of pretend like nothing ever happened. I'm like, nah,
Yeah,
I happen to remember that. Like I remember that this period very well. you know?
yeah. But I wish I was more optimistic. But I truly think if this exact thing happened again, I think people would react kind of the exact same way that they did the first time.
Yeah, I mean, you're already seeing it, but it's because it has nothing to do with. I don't think even what it is that you believe. It has to do with how deeply you've dug into your own trench. I mean, in the other side of the political aisle is I think almost as kooky in the sense that there's not an exchange of ideas. There are simply two trenches,
Yeah.
and that's all there is to it. And that's why I don't see this gap ever getting any better. You know.
I agree. Have you ever read the book The True Believer by Eric Hoffer?
I have not.
It's a book. God, I read it back in college years and years ago, but it really stuck with me about how ideologies are formed and how mass movements, especially. And I use the word because this word has basically no meaning these days. Extremist ideologies get pushed and how they recruit from each other. And keep in mind, this book was written, I think, in the late 50s. They used primarily, the Weimar Republic in Germany in the 30s to talk about how and why people drift towards quote extremist in this case extremist ideologies. And the big conclusion that this book makes is the ideology doesn't fucking matter at all. It's you can looking back at Germany in the 30s, you had the Nazis and the communists, the two big parties that were both anti-establishment and had essentially entirely opposite viewpoints, and they were enemies completely.
Mhm.
And their biggest recruiting pools weren't from the general public; they were from each other.
Yeah.
So if you can get people to change their minds that radically, it's less about what your message is specifically. It's simply that you have a message and that you have people, willing to die for it and willing to push for it and willing to make it part of their identity. And I think that's a lot of what this is. People will dig into something that gives them meaning, and people want to feel virtuous.
Have you
So,
have you seen
yeah.
the movie The Patriot?
Yes. Oh, that's
Mel
one of my
Gibson.
favorite movies.
I love them. Okay, so the movie that so in Mel Gibson's character is very, very, very loosely based on Francis Marion. He
Yep.
was he was known as the Swamp Fox, right? And so the Swamp Fox or Francis Marion that is kind of who Mel Gibson's character is very loosely based on. But if you actually were to go read and look at the historical, data from Francis Marion, he did lead like a band of guerrillas, in this fight against the British and the Loyalists. What's interesting though is that a lot of the people that he recruited to fight, and it's romanticized now, like the Revolution and like the movie The Patriot,
Yeah.
but if you look at the actual historical context, there were people who would sign up to fight for, you know, the Patriots, and they would gladly go kill people. But it wasn't because they believed in the cause as much as it was that they had now an excuse to go shoot somebody who made them a bad deal, like on a horse.
Yeah.
you know, and if you look at some of the people that fought under Francis Marion, they actually some of them switched sides, multiple times. But you again, you look at it now, and there's this ideological context. But some of that stuff was just, settling settling old
Yeah.
grudges.
Just like, hey, you'll give me a gun? You'll
Yeah,
let me
yeah.
go do dirty shit? Okay.
I can burn this guy's house down. Like oh yeah, I'm like, oh fuck, I'm in. Sign me
Yeah.
up.
Vive la revolution. Okay.
So so what's been new for you guys, man? I mean, what have y'all been up to, and who was y'all's last guy? I didn't see y'all's last episode.
Oh man, don't worry about it. Our last episode, God, that's not even out yet as of the time that we're
Oh
we're
shit.
talking. It was genuinely just a, hey, we're going to SHOT Show. Catch us here, and we'll be around. And but God, the time before that, man, that's the problem. I record so much. I genuinely can't remember the order of operations. We had Mike from Agency on,
Okay.
guy owns Agency Arms, super
Yeah,
nice guy.
good dude,
um
yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, actually, talking to him is what reminded me to reach out to you and figure out, I see some similarities. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, I like him. I do.
Yeah.
And I like their company, I like their products.
Yeah. No, they're really good. I carry an agency. It's great. I'm not going to plug his company more than I need to. I already did that a lot in his episode. But yeah, no, things have been good. We crossed 2 million a little while ago. I'm not going to, jerk ourselves off more than I have to on this episode. But since we talked last, Mitch has become a successful soccer coach. He's still living it up. I'm in America
Nice.
now, in the beautiful state of Idaho, and as of the time of recording this, and probably when people listen to it this Sunday, I will be at SHOT Show as of next Tuesday. We're driving there as of the end of this week.
Oh, well, looking forward to hanging out. You need to come by and see all of the new stuff that we're releasing. I definitely would love for you to come by the booth, and I'll personally walk you through everything that we've been doing. I mean, this year
Oh,
has
thanks,
been
Mike.
by far, yeah. I mean, this year has been by far the most productive and exciting year of my entire career.
That's awesome.
BR here with a quick word from our newest sponsor of the show that made our first video podcast possible, the great people over at Attorneys for Freedom. Attorneys for Freedom are a real criminal defense law firm offering attorneys on retainer for legal representation in self-defense cases, and are not some insurance company or provider. This means that Attorneys for Freedom are able to cover scenarios that are often denied coverage by other programs. Self-defense scenarios such as while in gun-free zones or sensitive areas, while under the influence or on medication, scenarios where you knew your attacker, and while using any weapon in self-defense, from a firearm to a household object or otherwise. Additionally, Attorneys for Freedom will not drop you from coverage, nor will they ever ask you to pay them back. Even if you take a plea deal where you admit guilt to a criminal act, Attorneys for Freedom will not ask to recoup their fees. Attorneys for Freedom covers 100% of your attorney's fees in the event that you can reasonably argue that you were acting in self-defense, and now you're facing serious felony charges. The primary key to coverage is their ability to reasonably argue self-defense in court. Nathan and I have signed up already, and you can too in no time at all. The National Self-Protection Plan is available with a one-time sign-up fee of $100 and just $35 per month after that. Family plans and annual rates are also available. Signing up via the link in the show notes or via the CBUNR Instagram bio link helps support the show with both your initial sign-up and every month you retain Attorneys for Freedom services. Get covered in all 50 states, support the show, and have peace of mind that should your worst day come, Attorneys for Freedom has your back. Thanks for listening, people. How's it going, lads and ladies? BR here with a quick word from the longest running sponsor of the Art and War podcast, Advanced Warfighting Solutions. AWS have been making tough as hell gear for decades right here in the US in North Carolina. Nathan, myself, and thousands of others run that gear through the ringer and trust our lives to it, whether that's LARPing in the woods or dragging kit through war zones. AWS manufactures many great packs, pouches, plate carriers, and our personal favorite, the SMU Operator Belt. A set and forget gun belt that crushes in build quality, capability, and excellent feedback from its many users. We are tough on our gear here at Art and War, and the SMU takes that treatment in its stride. Though already at a sweet price point, you can knock $10 more off your SMU belt with the code ARTandWar10 at awsin.com. The code and link to the AWS website can be found in the show description. Thanks for listening, now let's get back to the show.
I see some of the strides you're making, like 6mm max. I'm going to preface this. This would probably be kind of dry listening for some of you out there, and I apologize in advance. But I don't like boutique calibers. 6.5 Grendel came around and just whatever the fuck. I don't care. 6 arc, cool, whatever. Will it be around in 5 years? 6 max is the first one where I slowed down. I'm like, what the fuck is that? That looks cool. That looks viable.
Oh yeah, no, it really, really, really is. I mean, I'm happy to I'm happy to go into a little bit of why I believe that and what we've seen. I mean, I don't know. Is this audience into that kind of stuff?
I mean, it is. It did start off, and it still is a gun podcast. It's not always gun stuff, but I hope if you're not a gun person, you're just listening to me schizo rant. Just I don't know, fast forward a little bit. But yes, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about it.
So the 6mm max, we really what so our buddies invented the cartridge. My buddy Brian over at BC Ballistics, and they drugged me out to go see this cartridge. And just like you, I'm like, okay, another boutique cartridge, another like, okay, so I went
just
out there to go
roll
check
my eyes. Like we're not going to be able to find this in a store in 3 years.
Yeah, or it doesn't have any significant advantage over one thing or the other or whatever, right? And then I'm out there and I'm watching him shoot. I'm looking at the chrono data. I'm looking at like kind of I'm looking at the ballistic coefficient. I'm looking at the platform. And after, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes, I realized that I was looking at something that could legitimately change the entire game. Legitimately.
And I hate saying game changer. I genuinely hate it.
Yeah, but
like last
this
SHOT
really
Show,
is.
I walked around and it was like, oh, cool, the same thing we've always been seeing. I actually think this changes stuff.
Oh no, it absolutely does. I mean, and that's one of the things. So I'll make it quick because I don't want to bore too many people.
Whatever. They're here. They chose to download this episode.
Yeah. So if you look at the 6mm arc, the 6mm arc has some really great, ballistic performance. I mean, it's you're extending the range of the AR. You've truly increased the lethality of like the AR platform. It does some neat stuff, but you in order to really do the 6 arc right, you have to build like an intermediate gun. Like you're going to have to build a platform somewhere between an AR-15 and like an AR-10. You're going to have something like a dedicated gun somewhere in the middle in order to really get that fucking caliber to reach its potential. Because right now, if you try doing it out of small frame guns like an AR-15, you have legitimate bolt problems. The bolt geometry is weak. You have to thin that bolt face out so much to fit that larger case that you've made the bolt weak. It has serious extraction issues.
Cracking.
Yeah, I mean, prematurely cracking. You have to download the pressure of that cartridge in order to get the bolt to survive. You have to do kind of really funky stuff with the gas system in order to try to take pressure off the bolt. So you're having like rifle gas systems on 16-inch guns which have no dwell time. So mechanically the gun is very unreliable. And I mean, and you look at this thing, right? But like, I understand the benefit of wanting to be able to launch a 6 millimeter projectile. So if you're okay buying an entirely separate platform somewhere in between an AR-15 and an AR-10 and this intermediate platform, that's how you're going to get the most out of the arc. The 6 millimeter max now, you can put that in an AR-15 where all you're talking about is a barrel
Yeah.
swap and a new mag. Okay,
Yeah.
and
Like
now
just
you're
pop a new upper on.
right, or pop a new upper on, right?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, you're getting 6 arc ballistics, okay, out of the exact same platform. You're not breaking bolts because we're using an actual M4 or 378 bolt phase. You're not breaking extractors. This cartridge, we don't have to download the pressure because we're not worried about breaking bolts. So we can crank that fucker all the way up. I mean, we're shooting it at 63,000 PSI.
Holy
Okay.
shit.
And if you look at the velocities we're getting out of I'm getting 20-inch rifle velocities out of 10.5-inch guns. Now,
Holy shit.
now think about that. And then think about something in the middle to where if you were to build like a 12.5 rifle, you have a legitimate defensive fighting gun that you could work, in a house, you could work in urban structures, and you can also shoot out to legitimately 1,000 yards. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
like you
saw one
could
of the groupings someone did with six max on 1,000 yard target, and it was. I don't want to say how big it was because it doesn't. The number doesn't seem real in my head. It was,
well,
what
no,
anyone
that
else would shoot at 300.
oh yeah, or less. I mean, and by the way,
Yeah.
and the guy that shot that is a dude named Mike Russo. He shoots for us. He just won his division in the Quantified Performance Championship, which is a very big deal. I mean, some of the best gas gun shooters in the world are competing in that conference, and he won his division and the championship, and he won that last match with the 6 millimeter max. So this isn't like some dude off this. This isn't the guy that
Yeah.
challenged
It's
Garand
not.
Thumb with the 22. you
Yeah.
know? Uh, I mean, so this is a known entity, and the group sizes he's publishing, he's betting his entire reputation on, and Mike is a known entity. No, this is what we're getting. And by the way, the gun he's shooting is a 16-inch gun and he shot that group
Holy
at
shit.
1,000 yards with a 16-inch rifle. Okay, I mean
Man.
there's something really there.
Yeah. No, I absolutely think so. That is insane to me. So yes, you put this cartridge in someone's hands who is capable, and you can work magic because the idea of that. I mean, I stretch my 14.5 out to like 500, 600 sometimes. I'm a halfway competent shooter, but next to this guy, I basically may as well be throwing peanuts. Um, but the idea of stretching out to 1,000 accurately, maybe C Zone Steel with like 77 SMK, and you give me a few shots to Kentucky windage it. But
I mean, to give you an idea, whenever we
yeah,
load to NATO pressure, we're shooting a 90 grain like ELDX out of a 14.5 at like 2950, 2970. So out of a 14.5 rifle, a 90 grain bullet,
yeah,
at almost 3,000 feet per second. I mean, if for the guys that understand that math, well, that's significant.
yeah. That's
And
like
you,
a 62 grain out of a 20-inch.
yeah, and
And I
and
just made that up. I might be wrong. So
yeah, right. Well, and
yeah,
and on top of that, you can run the gun as hard as an M4. You can actually run that gun like hard. You cannot do that with an arc. You cannot
yeah,
run an arc like to those kinds of firing schedules. The rifle just will not physically perform. It will mechanically break. This thing you can run as hard as an M4, and you're launching a significantly more lethal projectile. I mean, at higher velocities. I mean, we have certain other projectiles being developed with penetrators, things of that nature, and I mean, it will, when loaded to the correct pressures or the necessary pressures. I mean, you know, I, I don't really care what you're wearing.
yeah.
It's, it's uh,
It's
there's
gonna
not a
hurt.
whole lot you're gonna hide behind.
Yeah. No, that it is the first like non-standard. I don't want to use the word boutique because I feel like it's doing it an injustice. It's the first rifle caliber that outside of what people have been using for 50 odd years that have actually given a shit about. And I'm really, really hopeful that it gets widespread adoption.
We have some deals with major ammunition manufacturers because honestly, the success of this cartridge is going to have everything to do with ammo availability. I
Yeah,
mean, people that know us, like sophisticated end users who know us, they know that the weapon that we're going to put out is going to perform, and as long as they can find ammo to feed it, this thing will absolutely fucking wreck shit. And I mean, and our job as weapons manufacturers is legitimately to increase the lethality of the platform. And in this situation, we have is in when I say increase the lethality of the platform, I'm not just talking about what the bullet does when it hits the target. Yes, okay, the
yeah,
destructive, nature of a bullet, of the correct bullet construction at the right velocity and blah blah blah. I'm also talking about your ability to hit a target, though. Whenever you're
yeah,
talking about pushing the bullet to some of those velocities, your parabolic arc is going to be much flatter. So if
yeah,
you look at your max point blank, or if you're looking at how you would zero a gun, you have extended the distance to where you could just hold on a target and pull the trigger. I
yeah,
mean, where that bullet, that parabolic arc of the bullet is never going to exceed that, you know, exceed or go below that 10-inch danger zone of where like vitals would be on a deer
yeah.
or whatever else you might be
Quote unquote.
shooting, the quote
Yeah,
unquote, whatever else you might be shooting.
yeah.
You have extended the range to which you can just put the dot on the target and pull the fucking trigger and make a hit. Like that
Yeah.
is a big deal.
And that's why I've always liked my 6.5 Creedmoor. It took a lot of the guesswork out, and this
Yeah.
sounds flatter and just as fast. I again don't know things. Someone's going to send me a message going, "Well, actually, your 137 grain 6.5 is going 3,300 FP." Like I don't care. I don't care. Six Max looks
Yeah,
cool.
not out of a fucking M4. It's not, dude. Not out
Yeah,
of a rifle that you could legitimately carry as a general purpose rifle that just so
yeah.
happens to be able to wreck shit.
Yeah, the
So no,
idea of a rifle that can reach out to like 700, 800, 900 yards, that you could put like a law folding stock adapter and throw that shit in a backpack like a
yes,
JanSport.
yes,
That is cool. Because
it is
you never
cool.
know. It's like hunting deer. Sometimes I just want to take a small little rifle
Well,
in my
Joe
rucksack.
Biden keeps talking about these deer wearing Kevlar. Well, this time if that fucking deer's walking out with Kevlar, he's fucked. Like,
Yeah,
but no. So I mean, so Six Max. That's one of the cool things. We're releasing our V2 Mark 10s, which we've completely reinvented the large frame gas guns that we're putting out. New rails. We're putting out our Alpha bolts, right? So our Aramet bolts, which are designed for extremely high pressure ammo. We have new barrels coming out. They're again designed for insanely high round counts and again high pressure ammo. The barrel extensions, all that kind of stuff is different. I mean, we didn't build this thing in a vacuum. It's not like we released a product. We released an entire suite of products that
yeah.
support each other. And so really what you have is a fucking system that's built for that is truly increased the lethality of the system. I mean, we just have. That's true.
I like that, especially this year. We've been talking with a couple of owners in your position in various industries about 2024, and the overall consensus has been 2024 has been hard. Well, 2023, sorry.
Yes.
2023 has been kind of a return to the. It's kind of a return to the old summer slumps. Like now that the COVID and all the panic buying scares have worn out, suddenly an industry that's kind of adjusted itself to a 2 year peak of selling has found itself a little over leveraged. What does that look like from your end?
So I'm really proud to say this. This is a big deal for us. We are actually our 2023. Our gross sales were higher than 2022. We actually experienced growth in 2023. Now, our margins were a bit down. And what that
Yeah,
means is we had to work harder to sell more guns. I mean, you had to actually go out there and fucking work, right? And because in the years before that, you didn't have to do any work. I mean, like, I would launch 100 Sage rifles, and by the time you hit refresh, they were gone. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, you know, or we do 200 veil rifles again, same thing. You hit refresh and they're gone. And so when you get into that thing, you get quite a bit spoiled, you get a little bit lazy. You get into 2023, and like you said, we had just come off of like one of the craziest gun rushes in history, but you also have to take that into context with like the rest of the fucking economy. I mean, people have a lot
Mike.
less disposable income. I mean, people are having, you know, the cost of everything has gone through the roof. In 2023, we actually grew as a company. We grew, which was, I thought, an incredible accomplishment because a lot of the gun industry was majorly down. I mean, we, you know, having read some of the NSSF reports, some major companies were down, you know, 20, 30, you know, even more percent. We experienced growth. Now our margins were down because we had to obviously work harder for those sales. And
Yeah.
so I mean, we got pretty spoiled in 2022. Um, but if you look at 2023, it's not just that we had come off of one of the biggest gun rushes in history. It's also because people have less disposable income.
Oh,
I mean,
significantly.
look, I mean, the cost of everything has gone up. I mean, I look at my grocery bills, I look at things like that. I
Oh
mean,
man.
it's astro fucking nomical.
Don't remind me. God, but before leaving it was like $8 for a pack of eggs. Now apparently it's 10. Um
I mean, but that's incredible. I mean, if you look
yeah.
at how, you know, the average American, I mean, everything from like I can in San Antonio, rent has gone up. I think like 20 or 30%. You know, like for like, you know,
Yeah.
people's homes. You know, and wages certainly cannot keep up with the overall cost of living.
No, not at
It's
all.
I don't see this as sustainable, and if from what I'm understanding, right now, Americans are carrying more credit card debt than ever before in history. I mean, that sounds like a kind of a scary situation to be in.
Yeah. Well, it's I can't remember the proportions of the country that lived paycheck to paycheck, but I remember it being fairly high, at least 50%. And again, someone will probably fact check me on this. I'm not an economist. I'm sorry. This is an entertainment podcast. If you take anything I say seriously, you're dumb. Um, but I think about all those people who are living paycheck to paycheck and, barely scrape enough to put anything to savings or, have anything left over at the end of the month. And I think about how everything costs double now than it did 2 years ago. How the
Well,
fuck are those people still around? And I feel terrible for them.
no, so do I. I mean, this is something I think about a lot. Like, I think
Yeah.
about it in the scale of like what is society going to look like? Because one of the historically, one of the ways that you would start generational wealth was to buy a home, you know, and then
Yeah.
that home becomes, you know, probably most people's most valuable asset. And then that home appreciates and then it can be bequeathed and so on and so forth. Like right now, with interest rates the way they are, with the way the housing market has been,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, it is very, very difficult for someone to buy, you know, a first home and if you don't have that foundation for how to start building the kind of like that generational nest egg, if you will, um man, I mean that like that is going to have some pretty serious, I think, serious repercussions, maybe not today but in 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, it's going to look, I think, kind of bad. You know.
100%. And I see, and it worries me a little bit that a lot of the younger generation who's, born, in the last 10 or 15 or 20 years even, and now that they're the age of majority and they have to deal with things and they can see all this inequality, and I'm sure every generation has said this to some degree, but they don't know how badly they have it
Yeah,
compared
I
to,
agree.
my generation or your generation, or God, even Gen Z is now old enough to have seen things go downhill really, really quickly. And I remember seeing a little bit ago, just a post being like, "Oh, well, why does everyone care about the economy so much? Like things haven't changed that much." And teenager, this is what they know. They don't really have a view of, you know, I don't want to be that person who says, well, they don't know the real world. They're just young, but it absolutely is. They weren't here for when times were good, and I don't even want to say good. I just mean better.
Well, yeah, I mean, go try to qualify for a mortgage, and like the
Yeah,
same house that if you could have made X amount of dollars, your income could have been X amount of dollars to qualify for that same house.
yeah,
Uh, you know, you're you're not going to qualify for that house now with with either interest rates, and then of course, like here in San Antonio where I'm from, uh, I think like 51 or 52% of all real estate transactions in the city were investment groups buying up homes.
I
And so
hate that. I hate that. Oh my god. I would pay a significant amount of money to watch homeless men be put in the same room with BlackRock employees, and the homeless men are given hammers.
yeah, I give him fucking M4s, Uh,
Actually,
but but I mean that goes back to what we were talking about. I mean, I honestly believe that like this disarmament agenda has a lot to do with being able to finally take complete control over, like I said, your ability to transact, to travel, the
to
information that
even
you're
own
allowed
property.
to own. Yeah, exactly, to own property. I mean, you will own nothing and you will like it. I mean,
Yeah,
and that is not a bullshit thing. I mean, at some, I think that the wealth gap between the extremely wealthy and the extremely poor, and you have like this massive erosion of the middle class, and you're watching it before your eyes. Unfortunately, like, you know, I don't think there's ever been a time where you've had so much owned by so few.
yeah,
Uh, and I'm a capitalist. I believe capitalism
me
is
too.
the best, but unchecked and
Yeah,
unfettered capitalism, leads to at some point. At some point, when Coke and Pepsi merge,
yeah. It's
it's
everything's
over.
owned by the same global megacorps. You know, your Arasakas, your Coke, your Mega Nestle, your have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy? I feel like I bring it up
Yeah.
a lot.
Oh no,
Yeah,
it's
just
the documentary. I mean, it was a
it's a,
highly prophetic film.
it was. I remember watching it 10 years ago and going like, nah, nah. I watched it a few years ago, not even a few years ago, like a year ago, and going, oh my god, we're living this.
Yeah,
This is real.
I need to invent a recliner you can shit in, man, and and
Yeah.
that's it. I'm getting out of the gun business. I'm gonna build the recliners you can shit in, and I'm out of
Just
here,
shit
man.
in and like it's got a tube so you can drink your hydrogenated soy supplement and your like mega Pepsi and oh man, I it was too real. Too real.
Yeah, but I mean that I mean, there's a sad element of truth, and I mean,
Yeah.
again, I don't see how it, because I mean, again, I'm not getting political, but I mean, if you if you look at the things like, I like the fact that it is fundamentally hard for the government to change, right? I like the fact that there is a level of gridlock, because that
Yes.
gridlock keeps us from going into any kind of crazy direction every 4 years. Every 4 years, I mean, everything could change, and then 4 years later everything. There's no way to like live a life or run a business or plan
Yeah.
anything without that level of gridlock, right?
Yeah. I've been
So
saying that for years. It's one of my favorite things with the American political system. Sorry, continue.
no. I was gonna say, I mean, so I like that it's fundamentally hard to make major changes to things. With that being said, whenever you see both parties agree on something, that's when you know you're really fucked.
Yeah.
Like whenever and so whenever you have both parties agreeing, like to either, I think some of the support for the Ukrainian, war, like we have, but like that is the definition of the deep state, in my opinion.
Yes.
Like your defense contractors,
Yeah.
your some of that. I mean, like those people, they don't care who's in power. They
Yeah.
don't. I don't think they don't even probably go bother to vote. I mean, whoever's
Yeah.
in power is going to help sell more cruise missiles.
I remember God. Are you familiar with Slade? Like Slade Raider?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the guy. He was on an episode not too long ago, and he mentioned first time he ever went on tour, and the moment where it clicked, where it was all a racket, was he was seeing Halliburton's logo on everything.
Yeah.
Um, and that's all I think about. I was having this conversation the other day too about Iraq. Like, what the hell was Iraq? We
I was, yeah. I mean, like, even then. So I actually kind of I kind of switched parties back then. Like I remember the lead up to Iraq, right? And I had
Yeah,
always been kind of conservative, mostly because of like gun laws, uh, and because I did believe like in a strong defense. And so back then, what's funny is that if you look back to the wedge issues at that point, like I thought that teaching like this was an actual wedge issue in like the 2000 election, and it was
yeah.
like teaching creationism in school.
I
And and
remember that. Oh man.
and I
I
remember
mean,
them.
yeah,
They famously asked George Bush, like, what he felt about evolution, and his answer was, "The jury's still out." Do you remember that?
yeah,
He's because at that point in time, and in politics, in that point in time, um, catering to the evangelical vote was a giant voting block, and there was the parties weren't quite as divided as they are now.
yeah,
So Hillary Clinton, or I'm sorry, not Hillary Clinton, but like who was that in Al Gore.
yeah,
Al Gore still had to say that marriage was between a man and a woman, because he was playing to the center. And back then, there still was a center. There was
yeah.
undecided voters in 2000. So I mean, you had to cater to that. And I mean, anyways, not to go too far
No,
off
no, no.
topic,
Of course.
but I identified with the Republican Party at that point in my life. And I remember whenever I stopped identifying with the Republican Party, whenever they started using terms like freedom fries. Because France was not
Oh,
all in. Do you remember this? So
yeah. Oh man, I was young. Don't get me wrong. I was a
yeah,
teenager, but
France was not like an enthusiastic member of the coalition of the willing, and there was opposition into invading Iraq. And so Republican members of Congress in the cafeteria there in Congress s- had them rename French fries to freedom fries. And and I remember looking at that as like peak fucking absurdity,
yeah,
and
that is clown world.
that is
Sorry.
no,
Yeah,
that is, yeah, that is fucking clown shoes. And I remember looking at it, and then also like the issues of the day were like gay marriage, creationism in schools, things of that nature. And that's not because I'm not a religious person or a person of faith. I just think like Catholics believe in evolution, and evangelicals don't. So it wasn't so much of even a matter of like the separation of church and state. You're actually pitting faith versus faith whenever you start
yeah,
getting into those issues, which I thought were better kind of left alone. But I realized it was all a fucking charade. You realize that like that these people have no real political positions. They don't really believe in any of this stuff. I don't think George Bush gave two fucks about creationism in schools. I think it had to
I
do
don't
with
think so
like,
at all.
well, I mean, I think it had to do with catering to the special interests of the time. And what I love to remind my Democrat friends, the very few that I still have left, is you cannot predict what the political landscape is going to look like in 20 years. So
Yeah,
20 years ago, defense contractors, oil and gas, energy companies, those were the guys that had the most amount of influence in government. Okay. And those guys usually pushed conservative because, Republicans were more of your war hawks, and they were certainly pro oil. Okay.
yes,
You fast forward 20 years, and defense contractors are clearly still there, but like oil and gas has been kind of replaced by tech. And and tech kind of leans to the left. And
yeah,
so now you have these major, corporations that now push and lean left. To the average voter, to the person that's stuck in the middle, while we're sitting here like back then in the year 2000 arguing about evolution or gay marriage, and getting distracted from like the bigger issues, like almost unilateral support for the invasion of Iraq.
yeah,
Okay, that you had both parties, fucking, push. I think, I mean, Bernie Sanders, I think, was like one of the only guys that opposed it.
yeah,
I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan. I just happen to remember the period. The same thing is happening now. If you don't put that kind of stuff in check, or at least identify the corruption there. Okay, so there are people today on the left that are celebrating the tech censorship, and they're celebrating the political prosecution of political opponents, and they're doing all that kind of stuff now because it happens to benefit them. You have no fucking idea what that's going to look like in 20 years.
yeah,
What industry is going to rise and take that place? What their fucking agenda is going to be? And so every time you applaud let's say Donald Trump being politically prosecuted for, so I don't care if you like Trump or not, I don't give a shit
Yeah.
one way or the other. But if you don't recognize that these prosecutions are absolutely politically motivated, well, you're out of your fucking mind. And if you accept that and you still celebrate it, well, man, wait, just give it another 20 years and see how that plays out for you.
Yeah. And this
You
is
know,
something I've been saying since the beginning. It's any power that the government takes for, the road up to hell is paved with good intentions. And
sure.
you have to take any powers that you give the powers that be and assume that it can go to your worst enemy, someone unimaginable, even. If Trump was, and again, like, regardless of whether you like or dislike him, like, I could really give a shit. But
Yeah.
if he was the weird fascist fucking dictator that the left claims that he is, you are giving him all the powers that you take. All of these powers of censorship, of clamping down on speech online, of surveillance, of anything else. Suddenly, you know the balance of power shifts in an election, and then your worst orange Hitler, whatever euphemism you want to make, now has all of the tools that you've given the state. And you're okay with it, but we're too busy arguing about fucking insert whatever. Like, everyone has to drive electric cars. Oh, your pronouns, whatever, to notice the exact same things are happening now that
Yeah.
they were 20 years ago.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you think that, if you think that the people that are if you think the people that profited billions and billions, during like the people that are going to profit billions and billions of dollars off rebuilding Ukraine,
Yeah.
if you think they give a shit about trans rights, you're out of your fucking mind. If you
Yeah.
think they give a shit about any of this stuff, you're out of your mind. People have to remember the political class is below the actual like uber wealth class.
Yeah.
Like, when you're uber wealthy, you live above politics. You're
Yeah.
not affected by any of this stuff. I mean, and not just that, we have to remember too that we look at things, like you and I, or most people, we look at things through like an American lens. Our system of fairness or right or wrong, or justice, or even just like our own kind of microcosm of how we live is through an American lens. Like the people at the very, very top, the ones that want to disarm you, they live in a global perspective. There is no borders for them. I mean, whenever you've amassed that type of wealth, I mean, like, and you start looking at uh India being one of your largest consumers, and the European Union, blah blah blah. You're not looking at things through with American interest or through an American lens. You're looking at things in a global lens. So I mean, these are people that truly live above politics, and it's sad to see otherwise decent Americans beating the shit out of each other verbally or sometimes physically over these wedge issues, which really don't matter in the big picture, not the
Yeah.
big picture shit.
Well, I think to a lot of people, it's kind of an escapist comfort. It's a lot easier to look at your neighbor with a Trump hat or whatever, and say that man and people like him are the root of all my problems, than
Yeah,
the untouchable ruling class that is, there is a very real deep state. Is it the same deep state that is harped on by politicians or anything else? No, I think it's a lot more boring than a lot of people think it is. It's
yeah. I
turbo
mean,
rich working in their own interests.
yeah. I mean, that's just it. I mean, like, I I don't like, if you look at the amount of wealth amassed during for guys like, say like Jeff Bezos, because people did not leave their homes and they're using Amazon to, like, you know buy everything, or have
Yeah.
things delivered, or or set them. I mean, I don't think that the guy contributed to the disaster, but he most certainly benefited from it.
Yes,
and
100%.
and having dealt, I've had to deal with very high net worth people in certain other aspects of my life, different ventures that I've been wanting to work on, or when I start looking at like the money side of guns. When I say the money side of guns, I mean, like, there's really there's no consolidation of wealth in the gun industry, right? There is
Yeah,
not. Like, I mean, if you look at the largest gun company in the world, which is like Sig Sauer,
yeah,
they would probably be a rounding error. Okay, like their entire gross revenue for a year would probably be a rounding error if you compared it to like Google. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like there's no real consolidation of wealth there. So when I started looking at how to help gun companies transact and looking at ways to find financial solutions to that, dealing with some of these like extremely high net worth people, these people don't have ventures like you or I. Like if you and I were to like invent something, okay, we invent it, it's awesome, and now we want to go and sell it. And so you go and you market it and you work really hard to get that product off the ground. That is not how these other people think. What the way these other people think is like, I'm going to go influence you know, the EPA or OSHA to
Yeah.
make it mandatory that you have to wear this fucking type of, vest on the job site, and then
Yeah.
you probably have some letter of intent to a company that makes those kinds of vests, and then you're waiting for your buddies to make the policy to make that thing mandatory, and then once they do, you execute the purchase of the vest company, and that's how you play. You're not gambling and hoping that like this widget that you're investing in pays off. That's a gamble. They don't
Yeah.
fucking gamble. They go and ensure that the widget is now a mandatory thing, and then they execute the purchase of the widget company. Well,
Yeah.
think about it if that's how if you got to play poker and you could see everybody else's fucking hand, you're not gambling.
No.
You're just accumulating wealth at that point. And that's how it works when you get to that level.
It's horrifying and kind of gets into what we were talking about capitalism earlier, which is, pure capitalism, which I absolutely support, is the consenting transaction between two individuals or more. You know,
Yeah.
I want to buy, I don't know, a Glock 19 from you. Okay, I'm going to go over and give you $300, $500, whatever your Glock 19 is worth. Is it salty? I don't know. But whatever you want for it, and you're going to put a gun in my hand, or a bag of carrots, or whatever, a chicken, an old television. Um, that's business between us as two individuals, and the government didn't take any part in that. It's when weird mergers between corporation and state start influencing policy, where this
Yes.
isn't this is cronyism.
Yeah, no, that's exactly yeah, what we're living in right now. People people blur the lines. We no longer live in a like a capitalistic society. We live in an oligarchy.
Yeah,
And this is exactly that. I mean, like you have a cabal of information, right? So you have, media, social media, blah blah blah, and they're all, kind of aligned in this thing, and there's no real alternative. Like our grandparents capitalism, if Bob owned a hardware store and John owned a hardware store, they had to compete for your business, whether it was prices or the cleanliness of the store or the
yeah,
customer service or whatever, and you had to actually cater to somebody because and that was like our grandparents' capitalism. Like there was an actual viable alternative. If this guy lost your business, you go to the next guy. When you get into the situation that we're in now, you don't have that. And I can give you a perfect example of that. Call and dispute something with fucking PayPal.
yeah,
Call because I've had my PayPal accounts frozen and destroyed. Where I had money in my PayPal account, they froze and they never gave it back to me. Go try to call them and threaten. Well, hey, if you don't give me my money back, I'm leaving. And they're like,
they're gonna laugh at you.
yeah. Well, I mean, and like, I mean, they don't laugh at it. The automated fucking robot that you're talking to, just
Yeah,
politely hangs up. So, I mean, like I said, I think we're living in an oligarchy at this point, and I think it's pretty obvious. I thought the Twitter files should have gotten a lot more attention than they did. Whenever you saw the cooperation between the state and a private, or
yeah,
an entity
yeah. The
for
FBI
that.
sending links, and the FBI instructing social media companies what to do, and the social media companies just doing, okay, yeah, we'll ban all these people. Well, that's fine. Whatever, that's fine.
Right, or even like the campaign, like the Biden campaign was
Oh
sending,
yeah,
was sending direction on who to silence. I mean, whenever you see that, I mean, like that is like the biggest form of I used to argue with my libertarian friends, and they would say, "Well, it's Twitter's right as a business to be able to refuse service to anybody." Like,
Yeah,
that's not that may be true if Twitter was operating simply on their own ideological beliefs, but when they're being instructed by the government, well, no,
yeah,
that is the definition of a First Amendment fucking problem because
yeah,
the government is suppressing your First Amendment by proxy. They're
yeah.
circumventing the Constitution by way of commerce. Like, that is like, no, that's a real big fucking deal.
That's a
But
real big fucking problem. And social media is honestly, it's the modern equivalent of the soapbox. It's a modern equivalent of nailing a manifesto to your church door. It's I don't
yeah.
I'm not saying this in terms of like, oh, we need to regulate it or deregulate it entirely. I don't have a good solution, but I absolutely agree with you.
Well, so this is one of the things that I have. I have friends and I have associates that have subscribed to this idea of anarcho-capitalism. I mean, have you talked to some of these guys that consider themselves anarcho-capitalists?
A couple times.
And it's a growing movement, and I noticed because a lot of the hate mail I get is from the anarcho-capitalists because we work with certain government entities and things of that nature. And my counter argument to that though is like if you did away with like these institutions, or if they kind of want to abandon the Constitution and let capitalism in and of itself be the rule of it, that all sounds great when you're thinking about it like in your own microcosm. But what happens if there was no more court system? There was not a constitution. Fine, you disband your police department, and in a sense, you almost have you have anarchy, right? Well, that's not going to last very long because Bank of America can afford to hire a private army. BlackRock can afford to hire a private army. I don't know if you can, but I know they can. And if they want to protect and guard their assets, like they're going to hire, some enforcers to do such a thing. And
I'm sorry,
once
what range did you say 6 millimeter max was good out to again?
yeah, yeah.
This is a satirical podcast. That was a joke. So,
Yeah. But when I talk to some of these anarcho capitalists though, that believe that like you do away with law enforcement, you do away with like the court systems, you do away with in essence the Constitution, and you let the free market dictate everything. That would be probably okay in our grandparents' capitalism, except for there is no fucking way that you're going to settle a dispute with like I said, Chase Bank when they hire a fucking military and they can, and they're not bound by constitutional. They're not bound by a Fourth Amendment. They're not bound by a Fifth Amendment. They're not bound by a Second Amendment. And so I do think there's a point where complete unfettered capitalism, if that was it, there's a paradoxical nature to it. At
yeah,
some point, somebody has it all. I,
because
I don't know what the answer to that. I mean, I think antitrust laws make sense. I don't think they're enforced anymore because
no,
I mean,
not really, because the people that those antitrust laws are meant to prevent now run everything.
right, exactly. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, until there's
Yeah.
a viable, the fact that if you were, I remember this, uh, when the Hunter Biden laptop story first broke,
Oh yes.
uh,
The
yeah, so
sorry, go on.
you could go to Google and you could type in like Hunter Biden young girls, and the fucking autocomplete and the answers were so curated that it was like, you know, him in some philanthropic nature, like donating to children, right?
Yeah.
It completely filtered out
Yeah.
like the fact that there was some really disturbing stuff on the
Yeah.
laptop about him and potentially underage people.
Yeah.
Whenever you
And
go,
now that's all. And I feel like it was so scripted because now it's all out there. It's all out there.
yeah,
I remember looking over a lot of it with one of the co-hosts here, Lucas, and there's some. It's like every time that guy wanted to smoke crack, he basically strapped a GoPro to his head. Every time he wanted to fuck a hooker, anytime anything, and like whatever, more power to him. But immediately the it went from oh this is fake to oh who cares, and
well, that's the thing. This is the stuff that baffles me. I mean, this is the stuff that blows my fucking mind. Is that uh, I mean, I'm old enough to remember, whenever like a news story lasted for a long time, it had a societal impact. I mean, it was
yeah,
discussed and it was digested. Now you have something like fucking bizarre multiple times a day. I've made this joke with friends of mine. I think I talked to Rogan about this one time where, where through messaging. But I mean, like, if aliens landed on the White House lawn, I'm not sure that would be the top story
I don't think so
uh
either.
for more than 24 hours.
Yeah. Well,
I
look how
mean,
many
like,
times aliens have been in the news the last 6 months.
yeah, well,
Quite a bit. No one gives a
but
shit.
nobody gives a shit. People are fucking dismissive. Like that
Yeah.
happens to be a topic that I am like obsessed with. I mean, I am like obsessed with the idea of the phenomenon and understanding that kind of stuff. I bring it up though because I look at the actual disinterest of people, and I look at the fact that there's a I am happy that there is a growing sense of skepticism in people to
Yes.
reject some of the current narrative. And if it comes out on the news, there's almost an automatic reaction to reject it, you know? But I wonder if it becomes almost like an autoimmune disease where your psychological immune system starts to attack everything,
Yeah.
and where you start to become skeptical of things that otherwise might be fascinating, that might be interesting. And it's not just the alien topic. There's a lot of topics that people have become indifferent about, or some new information comes out and it's immediately dismissed as bullshit without any kind of real examination. Like,
Yeah.
I believe that we're reaching the point in society to where you can no longer tell the difference between reality and bullshit, and everything is subject to interpretation. Like even things like, fucking math, gender. I mean, whatever. There is no more objective truth to anything. And I think that at that point, well, you're fucked. You
It,
know,
I remember we talked about this before, and my thought on that was, and it's kind of relevant to what you're saying now, which was a famous Soviet method of suppressing truth was to demoralize a populace by simply spreading as much bullshit as it possibly could. Some of it's bullshit, some of it's not. Some of it's smattered with truth, some of it isn't. Some of it is entirely irrelevant. But once there is so much information inundating the airwaves about every topic imaginable, this is exactly what happens. No one gives a shit about the truth anymore.
that's exactly right. There's no consensus on the truth. And and I shouldn't even say that, I shouldn't use the word truth because there's almost a value to, like, a value associated with that. I'm saying y- you can't even have a conversation unless you had a fucking primer conversation to at least try to establish an agreed upon set of facts from which to have the conversation.
Yeah,
So if you and I were debating an issue, we'd have to have a very long conversation to at least establish a couple of facts that we do objectively agree on from which to start the conversation. I'm not sure you could find people, especially from different political spectrums, to even agree on the facts in which to begin the conversation.
yeah.
I mean, like,
It's
like, I mean, like that is that is a weird place to be. But even myself, when I read something in the news, and it's anything, it doesn't matter what it is, what the topic is, I have to read it through the lens of like, okay, what is the author's agenda? And you
yeah,
try to decipher that, and then you go try to find another source to see if you can glean some more information that could be extrapolated as meaningful. But I mean, I don't feel like I have a good grasp on a lot of global issues because I know that the information that I'm getting is filtered through agendas. I agree with what you said earlier. I do look to social. There are a few social media news sites which I think are doing objective, real journalism
yeah. At least as much as they can in this day and age.
as much as they can in this day and age, and you can tell because when you read the comment section, there's there's people fighting, which tells me that if everybody's pissed off, that maybe you know maybe
Maybe there's something to it.
maybe they're saying something true. Yeah,
Yeah. No, it's I think I've also talked about. I always have to acknowledge it because I'm pretty sure I have like 8 topics that just rotate endlessly in my head, along with like the robot of the robot monkey that's always banging cymbals together. Um, And one of them was remember the whole Kyle Rittenhouse thing? Well, yeah, no shit. The
Yeah,
whole Kyle Rittenhouse shooting.
I was there for the verdict. I was in Kenosha, for the verdict, yeah.
Oh shit. Man,
Yeah.
I keep on forgetting that as being activist takes you places.
Yeah, no, yeah, but I was there for the verdict, but go ahead, sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
No, no, you're totally okay. I remember the night of the shooting. It happened, and it was probably like in terms of shootings, one of the most well videographed, well documented, well, you know, there was not a minute where the camera wasn't on him essentially. So you could see the entire shooting from beginning to end from multiple angles. And I remember
Yes.
seeing the shooting initially when it happened, and immediately, the headlines start to trickle in and trickle in. The next day it's all over the news, and I remember reading the articles from, Canadian state media, British state media, American corporate media, all of that, and going like, guys, did you watch the video? Like, did
Yeah.
did you like? None of this is based in truth. This is entirely just engagement bait and like inflammatory wording designed to elicit an emotional reaction. And I think it's inherently just the worst sort of journalism. I remember some of the words that CBC, the Canadian state, which is famously not biased and publicly funded, was using the word "sprayed into the crowd." Um,
Yeah. White
and
supremacist militant militia,
yeah,
murder, um, you know, yeah, I mean, all of that kind of stuff, right? And you're right. I cannot think of any I can't think of any high profile incident which was so thoroughly documented by so many different cameras from so many different angles from before, during, and after the incident, to which there was no question. You could debate whether or
yeah,
not this guy was, a good guy or a bad guy or whatever, but you could not debate the facts of what actually happened. I mean, like
not at all.
there's no dispute of the sequence of events and when
Yeah,
who attacked who, and there was no. And we were vocally supportive of Kyle Rittenhouse long before it was safe to be. Okay,
yeah.
and I say that because there was a lot of people that didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. There was a
Black
lot of
Rifle Coffee.
people.
Sorry, I had a cough.
Hey, hey, I mean that is true. But there were a lot of people that just didn't want to touch the thing, and I remember like immediately, like the night that we're watching the footage, saying, like this is clearly self-defense. Now, I'll be honest. I mean, I don't think Kyle Rittenhouse, in my opinion, this might piss people off. I don't think Kyle Rittenhouse was necessarily a hero, but he damn sure wasn't a fucking murderer. And
I
I
don't
think
know
that
why
he
that opinion should piss people off. It's true. He was a guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't think that makes people a murderer. It makes him a guy who's lucky he survived a really unfortunate self-defense incident, but he's just a guy.
yeah, well, the problem is with the Kyle Rittenhouse situation is a very kind of a good topic to unpack in the sense that so I went to Kenosha and I got to see this town. And it's a small blue collar uh, town that national politics really shouldn't affect. It's
Yeah.
so far removed from like the national political debate on some of this stuff to where you know. And then you see this town erupt into this thing, and then of course a super high profile incident comes out. And whenever you really unpack the facts around everybody involved, you realize kind of how tragic it was in the
Yeah.
sense that, like, you have these people that are so energized by whichever narrative you're subscribing to that it escalates to the point of violence for people that probably should never have been fighting or rioting in the first place, right? I mean,
Yeah.
remember what set the incident off. I mean, it was a police shooting that turned out to be, I think, quite justified. The person the police shot survived, yet if you listen to the mainstream medium, you'd believe that the man died. And it sparked this these riots and this outrage. And when you look at all the people involved, I mean, like the fucking pedophile that he shot,
Yeah.
the only reason that guy was even at the fucking riot was because he went to his like ex-girlfriend's house when he got let out of a mental institution earlier that day, and she would not let him in because she had a restraining order on him, and he basically had no place to go, so he ended up on the streets. And the only reason he was there wasn't because he believed in anything, it was because this chick wouldn't let him in the fucking house. And so that's why he happened to show up there not for any kind of ideological purpose. That's why he was there. And then the fucking other guy, the skateboarder dude, I remember a GoFundMe going around, and that guy's girlfriend raised significant money to raise their child. In truth, those people, the girlfriend and the deceased fucking skateboarder, they had met less than a week prior, and they shared a tent because they were homeless and they lived on the streets there, and they were there again because they had nowhere else to fucking go. I mean, like, this wasn't like some kind of ideological clash. It was, you know, people that got caught up in the mob, in a mob that existed because of fucking disinformation from the media. And if you look at this whole thing and how it was manufactured, it really is. It's sad in the sense of like, I believe that the entire thing was caused by very irresponsible reporting. And
I
and the
agree.
reason and the reason why I say Kyle Rittenhouse, in my opinion, like, that wasn't necessarily a hero, and why I think that's a controversial statement is because once he was acquitted, or once it became clear that he was about to be acquitted, then it became safe to speak up and weigh in on whether or not you thought his actions were self-defense. We did this way before it was safe, and it cost me a couple of interesting arguments, but neither here nor there. When people started to project their own ideology onto this guy. So, you had, certain conservatives projecting conservative ideology onto the guy, and he was asked to go on to talk shows and asked to do whatever, and they were asking his opinion on like kind of complex uh political ideology. And here's a 17 or 18-year-old kid who probably has never once really, at the time at least, thought through his own, political beliefs on what it means to live in a constitutional republic. And, I don't think this guy had formulated some of these beliefs, but he became the poster boy for something through an act that the entire scenario should have never have existed. And then I watched people, both sides, play a game of tug of war with really what was kind of just a fucking clown show, all the whole scenario. And so when you look at it through that lens, I mean, it's a really good topic uh, for what it is and for what it's not.
Yeah. No, I entirely agree. And I feel so weird and bad for the guy now, and just what his life has become, and what is probably, can't really weigh this objectively, but if he's not a terrible person, the worst day of his life. It is no easy thing to take three people's lives, no matter, well, two and a half. Fuck that other guy anyway.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, listen, dude, I shed no tears for
yeah,
any of the
no,
people he shot. Fuck
likewise.
him. Yeah, I am perfectly fine with the fact that he shot him. I am truly
Yeah,
relieved and grateful that he was acquitted, not just
yeah,
for his sake,
likewise.
but for the fact that, like, I believe the Second Amendment was on trial. But when
Yeah,
you look at the situation in its totality, like, that is probably a foreshadowing of what things are probably going to look like on a much larger scale if the agenda driven reporting continues unchecked.
yeah.
Okay,
I was
you're,
expecting more lawsuits.
well, he's being sued like a motherfucker, I believe. He's
Really?
being sued by some of the survivors of the people he shot. I mean, like I said,
Christ.
the female that raised a ton of money because her boyfriend got killed, and they had a, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars she raised for a guy she met like less than a week. They shared a
Yeah,
tent together. She did have a child by another guy who had custody of that child, and then that guy started to GoFundMe. So I mean, like,
Christ, grifting all the way down.
I mean, I think Kyle Rittenhouse rightfully should have probably sued certain media organizations that called him a
Yeah.
white supremacist, you
I
know?
I would understand why he didn't initially. If something like that happened to me, I really couldn't blame the guy for suddenly wanting to stay low key, not wanting to be part of another, pissing off the media scandal. But I do think that one, he should. You're right, and two, the media should be held to task for blatantly fanning the flames that caused the situation and then ruined this kid's life.
Like I said, I remember being there when the verdict was read, and of course, there was a small group of people on the steps that, were, very angry and protesting. But what was amazing is that night there were no riots. Like,
Yeah, I
the
remember expecting them.
yeah, but I was there, and I actually sat there waiting for this. I was with actually Mark McCluskey, the guy that stood out in front of his lawn with the rifle,
Yeah.
him and his wife, like,
Oh,
that's who I
I
was.
hope he got that back.
Yeah, no, he did, I gave him some rifles.
Oh, that,
But,
that that's cool of you.
so, but I remember expecting these fucking riots to happen, and dude, at like 3 hours after the verdict was read and it starts to get dark, the entire town of Kenosha looked like a fucking ghost town. There was nobody, there was nothing going on, there was no demonstration, there was nothing. The
Well, they let
different
him go. If you're out there, Kyle Rittenhouse is going to get you.
yeah, yeah. But what I really believe that it was once the media saw him acquitted, they probably had to consider the fact that he might have had some type of legitimate case for libel or
Yeah,
slander. And so the media did not, if you remember the reporting, even Joe Biden that day, I'll never forget, Joe Biden that day says, well, we have to respect the opinion of the jury. That was his statement on it after this dude was very publicly acquitted.
yeah,
And there was no riot because the media did not put any effort into inciting a riot, probably because their attorneys were like, weighing through the thing of like, uh, we may or may not get sued on this.
yeah,
And so there was no riot because there was nobody to incite the fucking riot. And I thought that was like the whole, again, in the totality of it all, it was a really interesting situation to see, you know?
yeah. But I think you're right. My mind jumps to that. God, this was back before people were getting killed in the streets, and buildings were being burned down and whatnot. I believe it was it's a demonstration of some kind, and there was a blonde teenager with a mega hat, um, who is in the well, perceivably in the face of a Native American man who's beating a drum, and it looks like the mega kid is blocking him. And I remember how that was reported, like, oh, he's going out of his way to do a hate crime, so and so. And I believe his I wish I knew names. This is years ago now. He ended up
No,
suing.
This is the Covington case. So
Yes, yes,
you're talking about the Covington case where the yeah, there's a guy and he just has a smile on his face, no
yeah,
reaction. There's a dude beating the drum in his face, and the media ran with that this
yeah.
was
He's
a
a white
white
supremacist.
supremacist attacking Native Americans. Yes.
Yeah, and I believe he actually sued for several $1 million and won, but I may be wrong.
No, he did. He successfully sued several news organizations, and then they settled for an undisclosed sum, and then obviously a non-disclosure. But that was blatantly. I mean, it was. I'll never forget that case because I mean at the time that was when I really. It was around this time period. I don't know if it was before or after, but you look at the Kavanaugh confirmations. The Judge Kavanaugh confirmations, and you watch.
Yeah,
The like just this some of these accusations and how the media reported it, and you realize that there was virtually no recourse. I mean, you could have your life completely fucking destroyed. I mean, I've experienced it on a small level. You could have your life just fucking shredded by a reporter with an agenda, and there's not a ton of recourse there. Now, on the Covington situation, I think it was so blatant and they were so wrong that whenever you watch like the rest of the footage and you realize that he was actually the one being harassed by the mob, uh, he was able to get some settlement. But like Mark McCluskey, of the people that stood out in front of their lawn with the
Yeah.
guns. These were like very smart attorneys. Mark McCluskey is actually a constitutional purist. If you ever get the chance to talk to him, he's a really bright, brilliant guy, a
That
great
would
attorney.
actually be a really interesting guest. That's a good idea. Sorry, I didn't mean to
I
cut you off.
No, no, I will, dude. As soon as we get off the phone, I'll introduce you. Me and him and his wife
Oh,
have actually
thank you.
become very good friends.
That's very
Uh,
kind of you. Thank you.
yeah, he's a really brilliant guy. Um, but he tried to seek recourse because the way the media had reported that was that he had gone out and attacked people on a public street with his rifle.
Yeah.
And in truth, like the subdivision, the area that he lived in, there is not 1 inch of public dirt. All that
Yeah.
whole every street is maintained by the residents of the neighborhood. It is not public. It is not a right of way. Like they were legitimately trespassing. The mob was legitimately hostile, and these people legitimately believed that they were about to die, and they were defending private property.
Yeah.
And yet, the way that situation was reported, but he was never able to seek recourse. By the way, that man was disbarred. Okay, so he
That's
was they were
political.
yeah he was convicted of a crime. He had his weapons confiscated. He was charged with a felony. They later had to plead down to a misdemeanor simply because the legal fees were being racked up into the astronomical numbers. They had him disbarred. Okay, and like that is what the media does to you if you stand up. I've been through this. I know what it's like. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. Um, and there's no recourse. I mean, you have very interesting anti-slap laws in this country. Now, I believe in the First Amendment very strongly. I'm a First Amendment purist. I believe in the right of the press to report. I'm not sure if I believe in the right of the press to assassinate. I mean,
I
there
agree.
should be some recourse if there's truly blatant lies. You know,
Yeah. It's defamation and libel to the point where it can ruin someone's. Oh,
that's a good-looking dog.
thank you. No, she's cool beans. I think she just really wants attention. My office for recording isn't quite set up, so I'm just kind of in the bedroom with the dog. I think people think it's a lot more glamorous than it is, but unfortunately, as there is no video that's actually uploaded, I can actually just sit here in my PJs, and everyone, all the listeners, have to deal with it.
Yeah, I
And
love what y'all do, man. Like I really enjoy listening to you'll have some really great guests, and you guys are really interesting to talk to, man.
thank you.
I'm glad I got to do this again.
I appreciate it. I'm glad you came back, and like the I want to do a third one. Maybe it's just something we do every year. Maybe
Yeah,
just
anytime, man, anytime we can. And like I said, I mean, I have a lot of interest outside of guns. Like I love guns, and if there are any
yeah,
people out there that ever want to have a gun centric podcast, well, man, I can get into the fucking weeds and we can go as down far down the gun rabbit hole as y'all want. I mean,
yeah.
right now, like my interest aside from running a company and building guns is a, a, look, dude. I believe I'm not a tinfoil guy. I believe that 2024 is going to be the weirdest fucking year of
Oh
all
yeah.
time, dude.
I actually wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah.
That's something we've been talking about here for a little bit. That things are going to get really fucking weird, and things are going to get really hairy. I want to
Yes.
know your well, not necessarily predictions. I don't know any predictions. I have no idea what the hell's going to happen. But words that have been thrown around here are like bloodbath, weird, unprecedented. Uh,
Yeah.
what what do you think?
I believe all of that. Look, dude, what I believe is that, you know, I don't think you have to be Miss Cleo to realize that, we are inching closer to a kinetic war with Iran. I mean, like that looks like that is the direction that the war hawks on both sides are pushing for. You're
Yeah,
seeing what
you see,
we're
Pakistan and Iran are bombing each other. That was not on my bingo card.
Yeah, no, that I mean, and then of course, like, we're already in a quasi like kind of proxy war, once the Houthi things are. I mean, I think that we're certainly heading in that kind of direction.
Yeah,
Um, which, in an election year, wartime presidents seem to, in some fucked
they
up way,
usually
has
get
approved.
reelected.
usually get reelected, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, because people look presidential whenever they're, talking about their country at war. So I do not put it past this administration to go and create a situation for a war.
Yeah.
But that's the tamest part of what I think is going to happen. I do not think that they're going to let us walk into November in terms of like the voting situation, and I no longer have confidence in a fair and true election. I don't
Yeah.
think that every vote is counted. I do believe that there is some level of manipulation with some of that stuff, but what is it going to look like in order to create the environment to where that kind of fraud can take place? Is it another pandemic? I mean, there seems to be some kind of hints that there's a pandemic on the way. Um,
Yeah.
I,
Another one.
I also know that, like, some of the civil unrest that we saw with cities being on fire, and these fucking mobs emerging in these really kind of violent protests. Well, it's amazing how those people just kinda disappeared, right? But,
Yeah.
maybe their funding went away. But, I mean, I have no doubt that you're gonna see civil unrest at some level.
Yeah. And
So
what I was thinking about this when you mentioned the Kenosha thing. It's like two of the three people who were shot were there simply as kind of target. I don't want to say targets of opportunity because that has a bad implication, but but people who were homeless and upset and didn't have a lot going on, and they were kind of you know through
caught up
their
in the
own
mob.
will. Yeah,
Yeah, they were caught up in
they
they
just
were
joined the
caught up
mob.
they were caught up in the inertia and the momentum of the mob, dude. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know if this is where you were going, but I was gonna say is like whenever you do see some of this social unrest, whenever you do see this kind of destabilization of like the function of society, you don't have like factions arguing about ideology anymore. What you see is like opportunists that come out
yeah,
and take advantage of like the fucking chaos,
yeah,
and that's what amplifies it. I mean, I don't know if every guy that's ever, you know, protested a police shooting, everyone I see running down the street with a fucking, big screen TV on their back, I don't know if
yeah.
they
I don't
believe
think they
in
give a shit.
anything. Yeah, I don't think they believe in a goddamn thing other than
Yeah,
the fact that there's nobody's making arrests that day, you
yeah.
know?
But I think about the things that have happened since 2020, and eh, the recruiting crises that law enforcement are having across the board, the amount of poverty and homelessness that has simply been amplified by rising costs and everything else since then. And I think about if a situation like this happened again, how much worse it would be and how much bigger the mobs would be. Not that every person who's homeless is an opportunist or a criminal or anything like that, especially these days where I've been in situations where in my life where if I got hurt or something like that, and there's a very real possibility if I didn't have the safety nets that I did, I'd be on the street. That those were a very long time ago, and thankfully none of that ever happened. But I sympathize with the possibility that it can happen to not necessarily everyone, but quite a few people. But that's not to say like the poverty generally leads to violence, leads to crime, leads to everything else. And we're seeing a lot of that now. So if another situation happens like the 2020 riots, I can foresee it being significantly worse than 2020.
Yeah, I agree. It's not just the fact that people's financial conditions are so much more dire. It also comes down to the fact that there I no longer believe that for regular people that we're like a nation of laws. I think we're more a nation of political will. I,
Yes,
I,
I
I
agree.
I'll tell just a quick story. Like, I was at a store. I was buying some stuff, and a guy walked in, loaded up, all he could carry of like wine and booze, and walked out the door. And I asked the cashier if she wanted me to go out there and drag that motherfucker back in here, and she said no. He does this all the time. He does this like
Oh
every
man.
week. And I
Yeah.
mean, this guy just blatantly walks in, like, grabs everything he can possibly carry, walks out the door, and steals it.
Yeah.
I pay for my items. I get into my car, and not even a fucking 100 yards down the street, I get pulled over and written a ticket for my tent, for my window tent.
Really?
Yeah, and it's like a $300 ticket, and I remember being, like, extremely angry, and I contemplated the idea of just refusing to pay the fucking window tint ticket and just saying fuck that.
Yeah.
Having just witnessed this like blatant theft that this
Yeah.
guy does every week, and there's
Yeah.
no fucking consequences, and there's an actual victim in this crime. Okay,
Yeah.
like the store and like all of us are victims because the price of stuff has to factor in the loss from
Yeah.
from crime, you know. Um, and I thought about just not paying this fucking ticket. It dawned on me that laws really only apply to people that give a shit about something. I started thinking if I didn't pay this ticket, that I don't know if I'll be able to get renew my hunting license because I'd have a warrant, or
Yeah.
the next time I travel out of the country and come through customs, or go through that kind of thing. They can see open warrants, like Canada. You can't get
Yeah.
into Canada if you have unpaid fucking. And so I started realizing that like I have to pay this fucking ticket because there's so much other things in my life that it would affect. But if I was just a complete shitbag and I didn't give a fuck about any of that stuff,
Yeah.
uh, then anyways, where I was going with this is that if you're asking if things are going to get worse, well, in 2020 there was still some level of prosecutions of crimes. Over the last 4 years, prosecution of like even violent crime has gone down. Bond reform to where you can get out on a personal recognizance bond for like attempted murder. There's virtually no consequence.
I saw that in Chicago. Now you were automatically. I think they got rid of cash bonds, but some of the things that you could get out for, unless the judge deemed you dangerous to the public. And unfortunately, it does seem that crime has gone up since this has been implemented. Have been everything from like gang rape to attempted murder.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
gang rape, attempted murder. I mean, it's like, armed robbery. I mean, like,
Yeah.
like really like violent and heinous things. And so if you were to couple like the situation today with like the unrest of then, and you realize that like, even in San Antonio, I mean, like theft of up to a certain amount is ticketable, not
Yeah.
actually arrestable. Yeah, I would have to imagine that like, people are a little bit more emboldened to just not give a fuck. And then the inverse is true too. I know there's a lot of people in that I identify with that are friends of mine in my circle that are at the point of frustration to where if they saw somebody outside stealing their garden gnome, they're gonna fucking
Tickle.
you dead in their lawn because they're
Yeah.
just fucking tired of it, right? So
Yeah.
the it's a cause and effect. Like nothing happens in a vacuum, and there's causality, and there's equal and opposite reactions. And so you have people that are blatantly disregarding the law, and then you have people who are really frustrated with that, and eventually they're going to start shooting each other. And I
Yeah.
and I don't think that we're all that far off from that being a reality.
I don't think so either. I was talking with my friend Jorge about this, and he mentioned some parallels to the collapse of Venezuela, which he lived through.
Yeah,
And I really hope that doesn't become the case. But in the
it's not.
meantime, you know
Yeah.
what you could do to help with that? Go buy a Sons of Liberty Gunworks rifle. You're not going to
Yeah.
shill yourself. I'll fucking shill for you.
No, hey, listen, man, we we sell legitimate defensive fighting rifles, and I will tell you that the demographic of gun ownership has changed forever. The people that we see buying guns are like if you were like 10 years ago, if you were to draw a caricature of like the kind of person that would own an AR-15, like you can kind of guess what that caricature would look like. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Okay, that is that is so far gone now. Like the people that are buying guns, and not just any guns, but I mean like defensive rifles, and they actually care about whether or not it's reliable in a life and death scenario. That demographic has forever changed, and that should be an indication of at least the internal conversation that people are having with themselves. And you can see it might feel like it's a conversation that's happening individually, but whenever you look at it from the 30,000-foot view, you have millions of people having the same conversation with themselves, and that is an indication of the tone of
yeah,
what people are expecting or anticipating. it's gonna be an interesting fucking year.
I think so too. Tensions are high. Tensions are very high. I like living in rural Idaho where it's not super obvious, day to day. But I cross the border into Washington and shit gets really weird.
Yeah, I can imagine, man.
Yeah, it's
But
like
look,
night and day. Yeah.
no, I was gonna say, man, I am truly grateful, dude, to have this conversation, and you having me on again, man. I mean, like
Anytime,
it's it's
anytime.
always a
Seriously,
blast to
thank you for
talk
staying
with
up
you.
so late with me. Honestly, we're getting close to the 2 hour mark. Hour and a half, 2 hours, and it is 11:30 where you are. So I'm probably not going to keep you too much longer. But I like this. I like talking to you, and we should just do this like before a shot show and just become a thing. I enjoy it. I feel like we could keep going. But
No, absolutely, man,
yeah.
and again, like, again, I'm super grateful, and
No,
dude,
I
any
appreciate you coming on.
and listen, I wanna get you in touch with Mark because that guy, I think y'all guys would have a really good time. Super smart guy. He lived through one of those really high profile, memorable scenarios where, it is a gun-centric issue, but if you look at the consequence, of what happened to that dude's life,
Yeah.
and him being a constitutional purist and a really talented attorney, he offers an amazing perspective on it. You would enjoy. I will make this happen.
I would really appreciate that because I would genuinely like to talk to someone who has lived it, and I think that would be an interesting and really fresh perspective to have.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well,
Phil, one of our sometimes co-hosts and our new camera guy, actually, just told me to say, tell him I love him, and your scalper lower is his favorite.
well, I appreciate it. I need to get offline. Send me his address so I can send him the matching BCG.
Oh shit! Oh, fuck. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike. I look forward to seeing you in a couple days. And any dad advice before we wrap up with this totally not stolen bit from Grantham?
Any dad advice? You mean like legitimately like as a father
I mean, you
or
are a father. I did like disturb you from putting your kids to bed to record this, which I appreciate.
no, man? I just I want people to just be like just be cognizant. Do not get wrapped up, or do not get wrapped up in the minutia. If it's a wedge issue that people want, if they're trying to stoke you into a fight, back out of that conversation and then try to look to see what's really going on. My advice for people would simply be like, if you find yourself arguing about something, ask yourself whether or not like some mega billionaire gives a shit about that issue. And if the answer is no, then ask yourself what's really going on. you know,
Yeah,
for whatever the distraction was, uh, and I think you gain a bit more perspective, and you
I
also
agree.
start to learn to develop a little bit more patience with people whenever you realize that you know that when you realize like if you look at your phone and you look at how intentionally the stuff that you see is fed to you, not people like you, not people in your demographic, I mean fed to you individually, you realize the level of manipulation that is happening on a very personal and custom level.
It's
and once
horrifying.
you and once you intellectually recognize that, I think it's a little bit easier to withdraw from being sucked into it whenever you realize that like that article that you see on your phone was fed specifically to you. Again, not people like you, not people that meet a few criteria kind of like you. I mean, it
Yeah.
was fed to fucking you. So don't let them win.
Yes. Have you ever checked your Google AdSense?
No, how do I do that? I'm a
Um,
caveman, bro, when it comes to this stuff.
it's totally okay. I don't remember how. I just Googled it, like check personal Google AdSense profile. And
I would
the last
love
time I
to
did
see
this was like
this.
a year ago, and it had a profile built of me. And it was right for
What?
95% of it. You could see that every single individual interest, it had a demographic that it thought I was. It had everything.
Well, think about it. I mean, every single interaction, the length of time you look at a photograph, the length of time you spend on this or scrolling, and where you stop scrolling,
Yeah.
and what you've interacted with, and what you've clicked, and then like the fucking conversations that you have where your phone is present.
Yeah.
Okay, and it is obviously collecting some type of data on that
Yeah.
which I do not believe that that does not happen. No one will
Yeah,
ever
no, it
convince
absolutely
me
does.
it
It,
absolutely does.
it's
I mean, and then you have AI involved that can really, really, take all of that fucking data and then, create a hyper accurate, profile of that. Man, just if you find yourself angry about something you read, realize that it was fed there to make you angry. Step back away from it, and then ask yourself, like, you know, would your day be more productive? I don't know, like going for a walk. you
yeah.
know?
I absolutely agree. If you don't get upset, they don't win. It is
Yes.
very addicting to be angry, and that's what they base their market models off of.
Yeah,
That's how
and,
they
and I,
manipulate.
and I don't mean to be apathetic about issues. I mean, I have
No, of
very
course.
strong feelings about certain issues. What I'm saying is
Yeah.
that try to separate the real stuff from the manufactured stuff, and I think you'll be a happier, less angry person.
I agree. I like that. I like that. Anyways, thank you, Mike. We'll do this again. Looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, hey, let's hang out shop, man.
I'd like that. Okay, bye.